Hi, so I'm going to show you the cheese cave, and remember, cheese making is the easy part. The difficult part is damage control, and so that takes experience, but it's not difficult. You just need to pay attention to what the cheese is doing. So when you have your cheeses, they're first going to go into the brine. So that's your salted brine. You have a formula for that in that to-do list, but it's very standard. It's a very dense brine. We measure the density. When you make up a new brine, you're going to use this salinometer, I believe it is. Once they're in their brine, let's say for about 4 hours per pound, then they go here and they get dried. These have been neglected. I've been very busy, but I'm gonna work on them. So I'm just gonna, you can see all the mold that's on them. I'm just gonna use like a salted brine, just brush, wipe it down. Because they're still very soft, I'm not gonna really brush them. I could, I might try it. You'd probably get a texture. And that, you can decide whether or not you do that. But for the most part, I don't like the way the brush feels on moist cheese. After they've dried there, let's say for just a couple days, then you can move them onto the shelf. And I prefer, I've kind of run out of some of the mesh, right? I still need to cut some more, but you can also cut some once you're going. You should have extra because I'm going to be taking out a lot of cheese, so you should have some mesh. But right here, you can see this material. I think this works well in the beginning. Once the cheeses have a really good rind on them, then they can sit directly on the wood. Again, not legal with the FDA, but initially if they're wet and you have them on the wood, they end up sticking quite a bit, and they also don't seem to dry out well enough. So I have some over here where I did kind of neglect these. I didn't maybe wash them as much. These are big cheeses. This is the St. Bernard. And what I did tonight, because I felt like the underside, they were just too wet. So I put a mesh, I got a mesh under them, so I added this, and then I dry salted them. So I just went ahead and they felt wet when I flipped them over. So I put some salt on them just to dry salt them. And if you see that happening, I think it's a good idea to do, because otherwise you'll grow some unwanted bacteria and you might end up with a spot that just doesn't age properly. Not very common. Cheese is very forgiving. You just keep up on it every week. Take care of your cheeses. You'll see the ones that are aged maybe a couple months, you could do nothing with those. I tend to wipe them down when I'm in here, but if you didn't do anything with them for like 3 weeks, it probably wouldn't even matter. Some cheesemakers don't even do anything to their cheeses. They let them get thick layers of mold. The most important thing about wiping down your cheeses is always go from youngest to oldest. So when I start wiping my cheeses down, I'm going to start with these young guys on the shelf. They need some attention. I'm going to take care of those first. Then I move to the older cheeses, like this one over here. And if I'm going to use a brine with a cloth to wipe them down, I'm going to do the older cheeses later. And that's because you don't want to contaminate these young cheeses with some of these older molds, because they're not really ready. They won't be able to fend it off. You'll see the blue mold tends to get on everything that's very young, and that's very common. You just kick it back. Again, these have gone too far. I should not have let them get that much on them. Normally I stay right on it, get the brine on there, keep them clean in the beginning until they get a good rind, which takes probably about 3-4 weeks. That's about it. I use these labels. I like to put, the date that they were made. Manchegos are ready in 60 days, but they're very good at 6 months, maybe even a year. And so I also started adding how many wheels. So if I do a cheese, then I put how many I did, because sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. I'll probably leave you guys the St. Bernard so you can try it in a year. This one right here is going to be ready in October. So if you wanted, if you could go even a little bit longer, maybe go to Christmas and offer that one for Christmas, it should be ready. If you wanted to try it at some point, I'm not sure when, I probably wait a year. You can use this instrument here. This is a tri-year, so I just tested a blue, so that's on there. And that can go in the dishwasher. So hopefully that's everything you need to know. Pretty straightforward. So here's my neglected cheese, the one that was in the brine that I really should have been working on immediately, which I didn't, but it actually isn't so bad. It's brushing right off. I'm actually using a brush on it, so not too bad. I expected worse. Yeah, it looks great. Cleaning up, super nice, so it's not so bad. Yeah, it looks great. And then I'll work on the sides, but you can see that. Here's a nice looking one. When on the upside it looked like that, you know, it wasn't very interesting. And then when I flipped it over, I think I had neglected it for a while because it had a lot of blue on it. But when I started scraping the blue off, it's so beautiful. It's like chocolate. It's really nice. So I like that. Here's another interesting rind. So these are goat milk cheeses and aged, and I made these because I was having trouble making soft cheeses with this milk. They're lacking a certain protein, but they really make a nice hard cheese. So once you get going, if you want to work with the woman's name is Catherine, to go back to doing some goat milk cheeses. Here's another one that's interesting. I couldn't quite close the rind, so a nice cheese is like this, nice closed rind. I just couldn't get enough pressure on these, and I couldn't quite close them. These are sheep and cow, but I really like how they look. So I think we're gonna break into these over the next couple days and put them in the store, because I think they're kind of interesting.